Perfect. Okay, we're live, everybody. I'm on my phone really quick. I'm just gonna make sure that when I get online, I can see. Oh, perfect. I see us. Okay. Thanks everybody for tuning in. I'm sure people are gonna take a little bit more time to just get on, which is cool. But we're just gonna jump into intros with the hour that we have. If anybody is new and watching, I know Kyrie and Dami have people tuning in. Hi everybody, I'm T. And this is just a platform today. We're going to talk about fathers, families, and incarceration. I know Kyrie from undergrad. We went to NIU together, where he did a little bit of everything, was the star of the campus. And I don't know Dami like personally, but if I'm Facebook friends with somebody and we interact, like you can still do that. Like we're friends basically. And there we go, Facebook cousins. And Madison, home for me, Wisconsin, that's our connection. Although you're on some much bigger and better things than Wisconsin. But Kyrie, I don't know if you just want to take a minute to introduce yourself to anybody who's on.
Yeah, sure. Hello, everyone. My name is Kyrie Cross. Like you said, we went to NIU together. I'm currently, I guess I can tell you my profession. I'm currently a recruiter for Apex. And from Chicago, currently live in Dalton. So yeah, T's, you know, she's a star herself. So we were stars together at NIU. So
thank you. We've got all stars. Actually, Dami, do you want to introduce yourself?
Yeah. Hi, everybody. I am Dami. I am from Madison, Wisconsin. And I currently live in Cincinnati, Ohio. It's a recent move, so I'm really excited about it. But yeah, that's really it. I'm a mom, and I currently work at a financial firm.
Awesome. Okay, so I think a lot of people are familiar with our conversation because I think a lot of people were excited for the topic. So I thought that it would be important to give background context. This is something that I've had like friends and people close to me want us to cover in a conversation because I think it's something that really affects especially communities of color. And I think it can be relatable to a lot of people. For me personally, my dad's incarceration definitely impacted almost every decision like I made going through life up until now, literally going to law school. And he went to prison when I was 4 in 2000. And he got out of prison a couple of months ago, and I'm now 24. So he served 20 years for nonviolent drug charges, but he was originally given a life sentence. So our family just kind of always walked through life as if like it could possibly have just been like well and done at that point. But his sentence was not commuted. He had been granted an early release. So that's kind of where I'm coming from. It's a very new thing for me, only a couple of months that he's been out. And so it's totally a different world because I don't remember being 4 years old or earlier and him being free. So that's the perspective that I'm bringing. Kyrie, do you want to share a little bit?
Yeah, sure. So my dad, he went to jail before I was born. So he was pretty much in there up until I was 20 years old. So I met him my junior year, and he was out for about 2.5 years, and then he just recently went back. So his first charge was a violent charge, but he didn't do it. He was just there. So they put the charge on him. So he got 20 years for a murder that he didn't do. And then the most recent charge is another nonviolent charge. He has to do 5 years for that.
Okay, got it. And Dami, if you want.
Yeah, so my father was incarcerated for 14 years. He went in, I believe, it was 2000, so I was 6. Prior to his incarceration, I did live with my dad. I actually found out that my dad was in prison. He dropped me off in Chicago, and a week later, I was told that my dad wasn't coming back and that he was in prison. So that kind of happened. In 2014, he was released. And then his charges I don't share them often just because this is something personal. So this will probably be one of my first times actually sharing this. My dad actually went to prison for statutory rape on multiple accounts. So, yeah, it was definitely different for my family.
Yeah, thank you for sharing that. And also, like, you guys set your own boundaries and limits, which I'm sure that you already know. But I think that all perspectives are actually really interesting, and for all three of us, really different. But like, I could become Kyrie like again one day. You know, like my dad's just been out for such a short amount of time, and so many things can take place and be really overwhelming. There are some statistics I want to share, and I'm actually going to start because of the point that Dami made. A lot of people, in general, I feel like people have already a terrible misconception of fathers, especially Black fathers, and that's who we're talking about today. But a lot of children live at home with their parents, or in some respect, like dad is around, and that's extra income. And on average, a family's income drops by 22% when the father is incarcerated. So, like, of course, that's not the full income of a household, but like, it just goes to show that, like, generally, whatever is going on in someone's life, like, they're still maintaining some type of financial responsibility when it comes to their children, and that ends up being completely removed at the point of incarceration. Some other things, just as we're specifically talking about parenting, as of 2007, 52% of prisoners were parents. Generally, this data stays the same across the board. So most people in prison probably have a child. For Black children, 1 in 9 of us have a parent in prison, compared to only 1 in 57 white children.
Wow.
And while 13% of the US population is Black, 40% of all incarcerated parents are Black. So we can just see, and we already know we're overrepresented in the prison population, which is why I didn't think that we needed to necessarily throw out all those numbers. But when you start to think about these people as not just being an inmate, but like people who have families, it's usually the families that we're forgetting the tremendous impact that this has on them, including like toxic stress and literally halting neurological development, performance in school, like the way that we can maintain friendships and relationships, all of these different things. And so that's really just what I wanted to talk about today. And I wanted to be sure that anybody who is watching knows that they can leave comments and we can see them live. So if you have comments or questions, you definitely can leave them and we'll be able to see and answer it while we're streaming. First, I'm going to just start with Kyrie. So during the incarceration period, which was literally since your arrival on Earth, up until coming home, what was, if there was any communication like? And if there wasn't any, then how did the communication begin upon release?
So there's a weird complexity because my dad's side of the family and like my mom's side of the family are like two completely totally different. I love both sides, of course. So my mom, basically, when I was growing up, I didn't really know like that my dad was in jail because I had, my stepdad. But he, like, I couldn't even tell because he treated me so well, and he treated me like his own. So it wasn't until like my dad that's in jail, used to send me pictures. Like he used to draw pictures, and on the back of them he would write like from Howard. And I'm like, who's Howard? And one day I just asked my mom, and then she told me like, yeah, your real dad in jail. And then from that point, when I was like 16, I got my first letter from him. And then from that point, we started like writing letters back. And then I started to talk to him over the phone. And the closer he got out, I guess the closer we got. But it definitely creates like a separation from like my dad's side of the family because he was gone my entire life. So, and my mom, they had like some issues going on before I was born. So I didn't really get to meet my dad's side of the family like older, so it definitely created like a little bit of a separation. We definitely.
Dami, what about you? What did communication look like in that span of time, and then preparing for release as well?
For me, it was a little different. Like I said, I lived with my father, and then he was like gone pretty much. And then for me, between that time, because I also didn't live with my mother either. My mother is um, now recovered. She's a recovered addict, but she was she was dealing with substance use up until I was 12. So for me, there was a lot of moving around. So in those earlier years, there wasn't a lot of consistent communication just because I was living here, I was living here. So it was really hard, I think, for there to be consistent communication in that type of situation. Um, but he still tried. Like I remember there was, moments where I have pictures actually from being small and visiting him. And I know like throughout there was a few visits early on. Like I remember like letters here and there. As I got older, once I moved back with my mother, at that point, that's when I feel it became pretty consistent. He was pretty good about, birthday cards, letters, pictures, like drawings and stuff. And my mom, did her best to take me to go visit. And then into my adult years, I would go on my own up until he was released. And I do want to throw out for the people, because I didn't mention this in the beginning, currently my father is deceased. He passed away 9 months after he was released. So I just want to clarify that because everybody, was talking about where they are currently. So up until that point when he was released, it was pretty good. Yeah.
Sorry for your loss.
Yes.
Thank you. Okay.
I think for me to answer the question, it kind of like gradually grows. I had always constant communication with my dad. Phone calls, like depending on even just like how things are. So in prison, things can vary. Like there have been points in my life where my dad was calling every single day, would get a phone call, lots and lots of letters, lots of cards, randomly and for anything. Visits, not so much when I was younger. He was in a couple of different facilities, but also like Dami shared, when I was like older and could go by myself, I definitely was like driving myself to go to visits, or like when my sisters and I were older, like would just drive ourselves and go to visits at that point when you can do that because you're, older. But I just really wanted to ask that because I think that a lot of people don't think that you can be a good parent while incarcerated. And I think generally that's a misconception. I think that a father in prison can choose to not be a good father because of the circumstances. But I definitely like dad's incarceration. He definitely showed and proved that as long as I want, to be the best father I can be given where I'm at, I'm totally capable of doing that. And I think that was just reflected in how much we communicated and talked to each other and like having real conversations and like constantly sharing what's going on in life, like how is everything going, things like that. Yeah,
I definitely agree. My dad was once he like got communication with me, like he made sure it stayed strong. Like to this
I
day.
think I got a couple Christmas presents.
like he made sure I was good.
Yeah. Okay, it's gonna get like, let's get into it, right? A lot of people I feel like already know or could have an idea of like how the relationship looks. But when it comes to how you are growing up and you're young, even at an age where you don't even know what's going on, there's so many effects of this as not the person who's incarcerated, but as that person being your parent, your father. And Kyrie, when you answer, like, I really want you to frame it maybe as like growing up as a young man without that perspective, if you can. But just thinking about what are some of the biggest effects of this, like that have ran through the course of, of your life, really, like what still sticks around. But also I feel like it goes in phases. So like maybe what were the biggest effects younger versus now, and like working on relationships. But just in generally, like how does it kind of frame how you move through life?
You want me to go first or Dami?
Dami, you can go first.
Oh, okay. So, I think that early on, I don't know. This isn't I gotta really sit and think about this. Hold on, give me a second.
Definitely take your time. Kyrie, if you feel like you got something, like jump in. It really doesn't matter.
Jump in. Yeah, you start because I need to think about that.
I think it definitely like takes a toll, especially growing up as a young man and not knowing like where you came from. Because I think, of course, genetics composes how you look, but I think like your parents' characteristics definitely pass down. Because when I met him, like I was immediately like, oh wow, this is where I get this from. Or like I get this from him. Like you can kind of tell like that you are this person's child. So it's like a piece of you that's missing. Like, even though I have my biological, my stepdad, he did like beyond and the things that he should have done as a, but it was always this piece like, man, like, why don't I look like anybody in the family that I go see? Or like, why doesn't nobody have the same characteristics? Or why can't I learn these things? I think it's essential for a young man to have a father in his life, especially his father, because there's a lot of things that women can't teach. Even if they know how to do it, it's still authentic to come from a man. Like, just being a man and like figuring out who you are as a man is a bigger piece of that comes from knowing where you come from. So that definitely took a toll on like I said, like not having my biological father. I had a whole piece of family that I really wasn't talking to, didn't know. So I just really didn't know like where I came from. I just had this one side, which, of course I love that side too, but I literally look just like my dad's side of the family, like spitting images.
Same.
Like, spitting images. So
same.
Like you got those families like where everybody got their cousins, and then it's just like me. Like I don't really know any of my cousins. So it was definitely took a toll. But now though, I think like once he connected with me, he made sure I connected with the family. Like he gives anybody a tough time if they give me a tough time, because like I'm completely different. Like I said, like college boy, like I'm first generation on both sides, so it's definitely like you could tell the difference. I'll just say that.
Yeah.
Right.
So
yeah. Okay. Thanks for going first. Now I have my stuff. So it definitely took a toll on me. And I think for me, there was a mix, because not only was my dad incarcerated, but my mom was absent as well during that time periodically. I mean, it was kind of in and out with her. So I think it definitely caused a lot of trauma for me, which I didn't really address until my older years, like being an adult. But I didn't know. I always felt like something was wrong with me. Like, what's going on with me? And everybody was looking at me like I was crazy. Like, I don't know. I had a very distorted, I guess, image of myself as a teenager and a child. I struggled a lot with abandonment issues growing up. So that affected my intimate relationships as a teenager, with boys, with men. It definitely took a toll there, because I feel like I overly exerted myself in relationships, because I had a fear that the person that I was in that intimate relationship with, or even friendship, would leave. So I spent a lot of my time early on clinging to relationships, even if they weren't good for me, even if they weren't healthy, just because of that fear of abandonment. So that definitely played a big part in that. Just, learning how to be loved properly. I did a little bit of psychology in college. I wasn't great at it, so don't ask me too much, because I won't be able to tell you. But I remember that there was one study that they did regarding mother-son and daughter-father relationships. And it's definitely a fact, and it's definitely science, that a dad sets the tone for the way that a daughter loves. And so that was like a really big thing, I think, in my life. That was where, it really affected me, was just my relationships with people. And then also not only did it affect me in that way, but it made it also hard for me to be trusting sometimes too, in certain situations, because it's like, oh, you care? Like people who were good for me, you know, and who did belong in my life, it was like, oh yeah, but you're not gonna stick around. It also caused the independent complex.
Yes.
You know, where I'm not relying on nobody. I'm doing everything myself. Oh, you're not gonna help me? I ask you one time, I want to ask you again. Like, I barely will ask you. If I ask you, it's because I really need it. Like, or I'm really like down to my last or down to my bottom. Like, so there's multiple ways that it's affected me. Definitely, I will say. So
yeah.
It's
I
good.
definitely echo everything that Dami said.
It's good to hear that, because I'll be like, dang, this like, you would think like I'm just going through this alone, and then you hear that other people with completely different situations, but you know their dad's in jail, they have the same independent, like, oh yeah, you're just gonna be here for a short time, not the long
Yeah.
time, you know, yeah, for sure.
Yeah, I definitely echo everything that you said. I also think something that I would add that I thought of as you were speaking is I feel like maybe even until like 2 or 3 years ago, I was like very shameful for his mistakes and his actions. And it makes me think of one time when I was in undergrad, when we were in DeKalb and I had my job. And in a conversation that I was having with one of my coworkers, I was talking about my mom who works at a hospital, and they asked me, "Well, what does your dad do?" And I lied. I think I said that he does like construction or something. I want to say that's what I said, but I just like I don't think I barely paused, but I remember pausing, and I was talking to a white man, older white man who I worked with, and I remember just thinking in my head, I can't say, well, my dad is in prison. Like, even though that is not a reflection of me, I just was like, I can't say that. And I feel like in certain ways, depending on like someone's proximity to me, I was also very vocal about it because it influenced like what I wanted to do with my life. But in other settings, it was like, even growing up, being really young, and I went to elementary school in Verona, Dami, and I was around only white people.
Oh yeah.
You know, and just thinking like this is like a deep secret of mine. Like only a couple of my friends can know this. I mean, all my friends at that point are white girls and their parents are multimillionaires and they're in 2-parent households. And like, they can't know everything about me.
It's almost like, look at this black girl, typical
Right,
black
yeah.
story.
Exactly.
Right.
Like once they hear that typical stereotype, the other ones
Yeah.
follow behind it, like, oh, okay, so your dad's in jail. So did this happen? Like, oh, you probably lived in this hood, or like, no. Like,
Yeah.
I really relate to you in that, especially because of my dad's conviction. Because it's statutory rape, it's like you're in a conversation, oh, what did he go to jail for? You know, drugs. Like, you don't want to, like, who wants to go out and say, yeah, by the way, my dad was incarcerated because he was having sex with little girls. Like, I don't want to say that to somebody. Like, it's like you said, it made you feel shameful. And even though it's not me that committed that, and then I also think that a lot of times some of our family tends to be, what is the word I'm looking for? I'm sorry, I'm blanking. Somebody fill it in for me if you could think of it. Our family, not delusional, but
I would help you. I don't know.
Like turning a blind eye.
Sure.
Or there's a specific word I'm looking for. It's at the top of my head. I just can't think of it right now. But basically, like turning a blind eye and not really like wanting to believe that that's the real reason that he was incarcerated, even when it's black and white for them.
Okay.
You know what I mean?
So
denial. Right. And it makes it 10 times harder to come out and be like, hey, because not only is it just, you know, a shameful thing in society, period. And it's wrong. It's wrong, period. I'm throwing it out there. What he did was wrong. But within the family dynamic too, when it becomes, you know, almost covered up, like, oh no, he didn't do that. Like that wasn't what it really was, or they were lying, you know. And then what made it worse for me is I was there, so I witnessed it. So I knew, that this was actually going on and these things were actually happening, whether the girls, were saying okay or they weren't. But knowing that and being that, it's almost like you're a victim too in that, because
Absolutely.
you know the truth, but you can't speak on it because one, society, it's shameful to even say. Two, your family is just kind of not everybody in my family, but certain, folks in my family. It would be that type of situation. So it was kind of hard.
Yeah.
It was definitely
definitely hard. And then I think, Kyrie, too, like even you speaking about stereotypes and everything that you've done, like you've just, you've just been so successful, like as long as I've known you. And I think knowing the stigma that like comes with all of that, I think I always, and I know like my family who I grew up around, like I know my mom would definitely say, I think I've always pushed myself to the edge, almost over, to be contrary to everything that I was supposed to be. And I remember being very young, before the grades you get on a report card even are intellectual ability, like you can't be a statistic, and like now my whole life until 24 years old, it's like everything has just been so critically like determined within me to always make the right decision, to always try to be the best example. But that can also be extremely taxing because you're adopting that for yourself, which is a good thing, but also for others, or to not be how others think you're supposed to be.
Yeah, it's like you're carrying the weight of like someone else's perception. Like you don't want them to think like, yeah, my dad is this, my family is this, so I'm gonna be this too. Like, no, it's like it's literally what you said. I echo exactly what you said. Like that desire,
and then it trickles into other places.
Yeah, exactly. Like that desire to be successful. Like I feel like me, like I'm not even where I want to be at yet, and I feel like that is gonna drive my family members to be like, okay, like our narrative have been this whole like jail, gangs, and death and etc. But Kyrie made a difference. Like Kyrie took this path, and I could follow him. Like my dad gets out, he'll have somewhere to go. He don't, like you say, he don't have to be in a halfway house. Like it's just like a lot of things that come with being a child of someone who's been and facing the prison system. Like it's a lot. It's a big weight. It's a huge weight.
Yeah.
It's like if I fail, then the cycle just continues. Right.
And that's a pressure that Dami, you had spoken about, like carrying all of the burdens, kind of trying to figure out for yourself, how can I play the role here? Like, how can I make sure that your transition is smooth, or that you have what you need, that I'm hearing you out, that I'm being patient, all of these things. So I guess preparing for release, like knowing release is coming, like what's going through your mind, both of you guys, like what's going through your mind? How are you preparing for that? And now you're not a child anymore. Right. So it's like, I'm in a different position. I can be like a helping hand. Like I have begun to feel in a couple of months that I have felt in certain instances or conversations, like I'm the parent. And that's upsetting for me to feel that way, because whether I'm 50, 15, or 5, I didn't have you, you had me. But I feel like now, because I'm an adult, I'm coming to the situation, trying to reason through things, trying to figure out what are the best decisions, where should you be, what should you be doing with your life, who should be around you. I'm not a mom, and that is what all those questions sound like to me.
That's exactly it.
It's like the roles reverse. You hit it spot on the head. Like you think about all of the things. Like before when it was my dad's release date, like I was filled with I'm happy, but then I'd be like I'm mad because like why weren't you like why did you make these decisions? And then I'm happy, then I'm sad. It's like all of these different emotions. That's like you don't know what you're gonna lean on. And then when you actually see them, the only thing that I was happy. But I definitely agree though. Like it's kind of like you got to take care of them, because once they get out of prison, like they don't have nothing, like anything. They don't have no income. They put them in a halfway houses. Like they say they're gonna try to help them get a job. They don't give them a job. Like, and then they give them stipulations like if you don't do this, you're gonna get back in jail. And I don't think they look at like they don't prep them at all, like at all. Like they just throw them right back in the world. Like I feel like jail is supposed to be rehabilitation, and you're just in jail is really just keeping somebody in this box until their time is up. Like it doesn't rehabilitate them at all. Like it's terrible.
This could get real deep. I mean, we could stand back to the Jim Crow laws, take the black man out the household, but I ain't gonna get that deep. But the prison system is not set up to rehabilitate anyone in the United States, first and foremost. Most prisons are privately owned and it's profit only, which is a big, huge issue going on currently. But yeah, I think the biggest experience for me, so mine was, it was rough for me. Everything that you explained was exactly how my life was when my father was released. So growing up, my dad was the youngest, so he was my grandma's baby. So even through his adult life, my grandma babied him a lot.
That's actually,
babied the mess out of my dad.
Ooh,
and my grandma passed away. Exactly. So basically, throughout my dad's prison sentence, my grandma carried him through that, like financially, you know, making sure he was okay, he was good. She carried him. He was released in September of 2014. She passed away in March of 2014, right before he was released. So when he got out, or when it was time to get out, he had no one. And also, most of my family resides in like Chicago, Atlanta, like they reside elsewhere. He was incarcerated in Wisconsin, and I was the only relative in Wisconsin. So I basically did everything. When he was released, I'm the one, I went to go buy his clothes. So he had an outfit to put on when he walked out the door. I picked him up, took him to his halfway house, had meetings with his parole officer, made his resume. I mean, you name it, I did it. And it became, you know, what started is me feeling like, not only for him, because, you know, for being incarcerated for 14 years, you're definitely like, what is the word I use? I am just blanking tonight. I am so sorry, guys. I had my son all day and I was working, so my mind is a little blank. Institutionalized. That's what I was looking for. You're definitely institutionalized. And that's for the case for a lot of inmates. And that's why I said the system is not set up to rehabilitate. It's set up to railroad them right on back. If you know, being realistic. In my case, they put my dad in the halfway house back in the same small town that he was arrested in. And they wouldn't let him transfer to Madison, which was close for me. He was in Beaver Dam, Wisconsin, and we were in Madison at the time. So they wouldn't let him. I had several phone calls, meetings, everything with his parole officer, and she refused. She said no. So to me, they're putting him in the same situation that he failed in. You're setting him up for failure, knowing that he's institutionalized, like most men incarcerated for that long of a period of time. So there was pressure like on me, you know, not only because my grandma was no longer around to kind of mother him, so he clinged to me for that, but just because I knew what I knew about the system. So I felt guilty and bad for him. And then on top of that, just, you know, for my own, like you were saying, the shame. Like I wanted to say, hey, my dad got out and he got it together. Yeah. You know, my dad got out and he fixed it. So, I mean, I monitored everything he did, who he was around, because he was a statutory rape offender. He was a sex offender. So he couldn't come around my daughter legally. Like there was so much stuff that played into that. And it just became such an overwhelming thing for me. I mean, it was to the point where he like slowly like moved into my house at one point. Like I had a whole like closet and it was just like full of his shoes and stuff. And I'm like, Dad, like this stuff has to go. Like you are living on your own. You know, I helped you do this, this, and this. But yeah, it became overwhelming to the point that we actually stopped speaking. And I didn't speak to my dad all the way up into the point of his passing. I think the last thing I said to my dad actually was not that great. But yeah, it definitely affected me in that, in being that caretaker. So
yeah, that's definitely overwhelming. And I think that the institutionalized behavior, like I think that a lot of people can see that. And I don't know if you guys can think of like what are actual signs of that you would like say to someone, because I'm really trying to think. Go. I mean, go ahead. Whatever you can think of.
Now, Dom, you can go first.
I mean, the aggression. Having to be aggressive outside of a prison setting, I think it just was a natural, like, institutionalized behavior. You know, that like having to watch your back everywhere you go, having to say something right away before someone says something to you. I remember we were in the mall one day, and this is kind of funny, but it's a good example. We were in the mall, and it was me, my ex-fiance, my daughter, and my dad. And we're walking in the mall, and you know those like kiosk people that are just like at the phone kiosk. There was like this old man at the phone kiosk. We're walking past, we're not paying attention, we're doing what we're doing. All of a sudden, my dad turns around and goes, "Don't let me catch you looking at my daughter's ass again like that." And like started going off on this old man, and we're looking like, what is going on? And I had to like pull him to the side, and I'm like, "Dad, you are not in prison anymore. You cannot do that. Like, the police will get called and you will be right back. Like, you got to chill out." So there was like that heightened aggression at all times, and like just really like just overly sensitive to small situations, I guess, that I noticed.
I think that you're spot on. Like, you saying it, I'm like, yeah, definitely. And then I had thought of like combativeness as well. I think just knowing what you know and sticking to it, and nothing can, you know, change that. There's one way, and it's got to be this way. And that probably comes from one, survival, but also the constant routine. And then I also think of fast pace. You think that you lost 20 years of life, 14 years of life, whatever it is. And so you want to hit the ground running, and that's normal until it's not anymore. Mm-hmm. And they like can't step back or slow down. Like, certain things are go through the motion type things. You can't skip steps. You can't, you know, or like conversations, even like how you have a conversation. Like, we can talk now. The phone isn't going to click off after 15 minutes. Like, we can have a conversation. We don't have to speed through everything, or like we can start with how our days are going before jumping into all the other heavy shit that comes along with the circumstances. But I definitely agree with everything that you said. And I know, Kyrie, you probably have your own thoughts too.
Yeah, my dad used to, he hid his aggression piece from me, because over like when he was in jail, like I told him, like, because he wrote a book on his life, and he wrote all the things he used to do, bad and negative. I mean, bad and good. And like he's physically abusive to my mother. So I had this like piece of resentment. So I sum it up. I basically told him, like, if you get out of jail and you show that same you that you were before you went in, like, we're not going to have a relationship at all. So I think that strayed him away from showing me his aggressive side. But as you can see, he's back in jail. And a piece of that is from, you know, that institutionalized behavior. You know, like people say start stuff to him, and like I feel like the first thing is to get physically violent. Second thing, he was really strict about times, like doing stuff, like very prompt. And I mean, I guess that was like a good thing, but like he would eat at certain times, shower at certain times. It's like that. Like, you don't have to be on this strict, like, you know, schedule. And I feel like he was in there for 20 years though. It's like, how do you just because you're out, like, how do you even just assimilate to this world? And you've missed 20 years. So like how you said to you, like, they feel like they got to catch up. Like, he used to work a crazy amount of hours. And like I used to just be like, you know, like sometimes you can just relax, like enjoy life, like enjoy being out. Like, one thing he would do is catch up with his family. But yeah, like institutionalized behavior, definitely the scheduling, definitely the aggressiveness. And always telling me like, yeah, you shouldn't trust this person. Like, and sometimes he'd be right though. Like, really, like that intuition, that jail intuition is right. Because some people, he told me like, that's not your friend, and it would turn out like sooner or later, whether it was the next day or the next year, like that person wouldn't be like that. So
yeah, very true. And even you kind of speaking to how some of these habits have circled back around, and now he's you know, in the situation that he's in now, what is that a feeling of being let down? What does it make you think about him? And also, what does it make you think about yourself?
Yeah, I definitely would, like, when I got the news, I was definitely crying because I was like, I was mad. I was just like, you've been out for 20, I mean, you went in there for 20 years, like, and you couldn't not do anything to mess that up. Like, you know, like we were so close, like getting so close, like, and I finally felt like I was learning like where I came from and like learning the bad behaviors that I do. Like, he was teaching me so much. So when I found out he went back to jail, it basically broke my heart, and it felt like a failure. Like I couldn't keep you out of there. Like maybe that wasn't enough motivation, but like again, like when you go to jail, I feel like they just throw you right back in the same situation. They put him in Chicago and in what we call the Wild Hundred. So like it's just like there are halfway houses and nice neighborhoods, and I know that for a fact because I looked it up. So, and I just feel like they just put him right where they think he should fit in. Like, and then like when he went back for court, like the judge told him like you're a menace to society, and it's just like you don't even know him, like you don't really truly know him, but your actions that like in her mind, like your record and what you just did, like shows her that you are a menace to society. So it's just like it's hard. It's like I want to be supportive, but I'm pissed because like why couldn't you just stay out of jail? You know.
Oh wait, dummy, are you muted? Oh wait, there it said muted. There it does not. Were you connected to AirPods or? I wonder if. Oh wait. Am I mishearing it? I feel like a distant noise. I hear like distant noise. Do you too, Kyrie? I don't know. It's like the audio is somewhere, but it's like far or something. I'm not sure.
Yeah, it's like it's not in the same room anymore.
Yeah.
So
okay. I can read lips. I could read lips. Sticking to that though, because I feel like I have a sister who had always expressed to me, in her opinion, that if our dad got out, would go back to prison. Oh, wow. And I was always like, absolutely not, absolutely not, absolutely not. You know what I'm saying? Never agreed with that, never felt that way. And, you know, for whatever reason, and that would be a conversation, you know, something I'd have to ask her what would make her feel that way, because it could be what you're saying. I mean, it is very much a setup. The whole system, parole and probation is a setup. Or I don't know if there were her own experiences with our dad that made her feel that way. But I definitely think that, let's see. Oh, I definitely hear noise.
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay. I had to, my daughter's friend called her and I think it messed up. Okay, I get notification.
Got it. No, you're fine. Oh yeah, no, you're fine. And I think because my dad is in a halfway house right now. Mm-hmm. So he's in that point of the transition. And obviously after that, there's so much more to come. Like, I feel like that's supposed to be a middle ground where there's like less thrown in your face before it's just like you literally can't be here now. This is your last day and you're going to pack your things and you have to go now, like to your permanent housing, like wherever that is. And so I don't know how to anticipate that, but upon preparing for the release, which we talked about earlier, I had extremely high expectations of what I thought is like a father-daughter relationship, how we would talk to each other, how often we would talk to each other, how often I would see you. Like I'm in a different part of the country, but like how often I'm gonna like see you, holidays. I don't have kids, but I have tons of nieces and nephews. So like thinking about how, you know, the grandchildren come into the picture. And in such a short time, I think that was my biggest downfall, was really having expectations. And so now merging into like, once he can leave the halfway house, I'm just trying to remind myself to just let things like roll off your back and let things come as they come and people be who they are. Kyrie, you spoke about like you felt like your dad hid his aggression or like that part of him, and that's such a more profound characteristic than many. It's a very particular thing for someone to be that by nature. You know what I'm saying? And I definitely have been in just 2 months have realized that this might not be the person that I have thought and had been so close to and communicated with so much for 20 years. Because like I said, our communication was always solid and stable. And then after 20 years, I'm like, I don't know if it just comes with the freedom that you can just like come into the world and like you are who you really are, or you're someone who you are like, because I just don't know, you know what I'm saying? But I just feel like I don't know who that person was. I don't think I knew who I thought I knew for 20 years.
It's like they give us like, it's like we have this specific piece of them and then everyone else gets. I don't know what the word is or like, but I feel you though. I definitely feel you. Like he'll like over those 20 years, you know, you probably envisioning like we're gonna like do this. He's probably gonna do this, and then like now you got just being in person, you get to see like how they actually are, like not the nonverbals, and then you see how people treat other people. You're just kind of like, oh, like oh, that's how you really are, pops. Like,
yeah.
I definitely feel you.
I know that prior to my little phone issue, I would say that I think that a big portion, like as far as halfway houses go, jumping back to that, like I think that, you know, I know for me personally with my dad, I think the biggest issue with like him going back, because oh yeah, that's what I was gonna say. My dad actually got arrested again and he was sent back to jail. He went to jail, I think it was like January of 2015, and he was released, or no, March. It was March of 2015. And then he was released a week before he passed in May. So that entire time he had got, you know, back involved in the same stuff, and that jumps back into institutionalism. Like you basically, you know, are witnessing someone, for me personally, who he could not shake his old habits. It's like he went in and life was this way, and it's 2000, you know, and then you come out, it's 2014, things are entirely different. It was to the point where like he was trying to wear like windbreaker sweatsuits, y'all, like windbreaker, and I'm like, Dad, nobody wears that anymore, you know, like. So there's like little details in that, but it also affected a lot of his behaviors. He still felt young because when he went in, it's like he went into a time capsule and he was stuck there. So coming out, and then on top of that being isolated, he was in Beaver Dam, Wisconsin. Everybody else is everywhere else. It really kind of enabled those types of behaviors. You know, you take a person, put them back in the same situation with what they have, they're going to do the same thing. So I was very disappointed. I felt a lot like you, Kyrie. I was almost angry at myself. Like I did all of this. How did he go to, you know, jail? I was also kind of guilty because I'm like, well, maybe if I would be talking to him, he wouldn't have ended up back there. But I grew to learn that it was the best choice for me to just step back because he was an adult. And then kind of jumping around again into what you were just speaking on, T, like, I think that being a child, you set your expectations high for your parents anyway. You know, kids will get yelled at, cursed out, abused, and they still love their parents no matter what. So automatically, we emotionally set high expectations for our parents all around because they're the first people that are supposed to love us. I think with people that are incarcerated, they reach out way more because they don't have anybody in there. They have us. So they cling to those relationships because we're there. We're the connection that they have to the outside world. And then it is, I think, freedom. I know for me personally, once my dad was released, you know, those people are there now. They're tangible. You know, they're able to be touched. They're able to be talked to whenever, you know, on your leisure. So it kind of becomes, you know, like a relationship. You get in a relationship, you get comfortable. In the beginning, you kind of got to walk on eggshells because you wanted them to stick around. But once you know they're there, it's cool. You know, it's kind of that type of situation. And I know for me, my dad, he used to jokingly call me the warden. So I think that's where our rift was when he was out, versus us being closer when he was in, because I spent so much time trying to redirect his life. It's almost like I think he felt like I was suffocating him, just suffocating him, and he couldn't breathe, and he just wanted me kind of away. And the more that I pushed him to do other things, the more he clinged to the old stuff. And I think it's just because of that freedom. In prison, you have people telling you what to do 24/7. So for me personally, I think that that's something that I could have done better, is just allowed him to have that space to, if he's going to make a mistake. You're the one who has to deal with those consequences. It's not on me. I think that could have maybe bettered our relationship a little bit. But yeah, that's kind of what my experience was prior to him passing. So.
Yeah, I think a lot of that there is really instrumental. And to your point of people who are incarcerated, they need outside communication. So the way that you talk to people on the outside, your family, your friends, whatever, is very different, because you want them to pick up when you call, because you want to be able to go to the phone and have phone calls.
Right.
And the dynamic does change, of course, like you're saying, once you're out, the level of need, whatever that might be. But something that was really particular for me on the other side of that, because I feel like I have consistently, consistently always, gone out of my way, and I feel like done my part communication wise. But then also people get out, and people who were never there for you, who were never around, who never did anything or looked out for you, can so easily be back in the picture. And I can't put my foot down and say who can or cannot be in the picture. But you would just think, after all that time, for people who never looked out for you or did anything for you, that there would be a stiff arm once you're free. But everyone's lifestyle is different. I can't speak for you guys, but if it resonates, then it does. The lifestyle that my dad was living before had so many people, in the late 90s, because the time capsule is real.
It's different.
So we fast forward 20 years later, and people from the late 90s want to come be back around. You're feeling how you was feeling in the late 90s, but you're not the man in his late 20s or a 30-year-old man.
Right.
You're a 50-year-old great grandfather, whatever it is. And I feel like that for me has been my biggest sign to do what you did, Dami, which was healthy for you, and just fall back for me personally. Because you can't get out of prison after 20 years and live your life like it's the year 2000 productively, in my personal opinion. Right. And that has been the biggest telltale for me. And I think I'm okay with what you were okay with, and that is just knowing that someone is an adult and you don't get up every morning and make their choices. And I think it's been just more easier for me. And I feel like that's who I always have to make my decisions for, is me, to be able to just step back and be like, my life is going to just be easier if I just let you ride this out how you do. And I hope it goes in the right direction. And if it's a direction that I end up liking, then I'm always here. But it's 2021, almost 2022. And we can't still be living 2 decades ago.
Yeah, absolutely. I completely agree. I feel like all three of our fathers fall into the same thing post prison, because my dad started hanging out with his old friends. Like you said, people who've been waiting for 20 years for you to get out. Now that you guys are reunited, now you guys are doing stuff you were doing when you were 20 years old. And it's just you can't burden the stress of trying to push this grown man to go do something, do the right thing, essentially. You automatically think that they would do the right thing because they've been into this box for so long. So they'll try to do everything in their power not to go back. You know.
And then, yeah, I just want to, because I've experienced kind of where you both are at. I've been at both of those points. I've been where you are, T, and I've also been where you are, Kyrie. And for anyone who's watching who is in this situation, I just want to say, my advice would be, one, give yourself grace. Give yourself grace. You are the child, they are the parent. Give yourself grace. Two, give them grace. People, period, people incarcerated, people in your everyday life can only meet you where they are. They can't meet you where you are because you guys are on two different paths. They can only meet you where you're at. So knowing that, sometimes you just have to take a step back, take a breath, go, hey, I'm going to give myself grace and give myself a break. This is not my responsibility, but I'm going to give you grace because you can only do what you can do, even if it's not what I want you to do. Even if it's not what I feel is best for you, I have to allow you to be free to make those decisions for yourself. And I'm not going to beat myself up about it because in the end, that's going to hurt me. It's going to hurt you. And it'll hurt us, combined together. It's going to hurt our relationship. So I think that I wish I would have focused more on the love and just cultivating my dad as a person because he was an inmate, but that was just a label. That's not who he was as a person and as a human being. He was still my dad. And although he wasn't always the best parent sometimes or the best person in the outside world, he did love me. And he tried to exhibit that. And I'm also a mother. So, my view also of being a parent to a child is a little bit different. I have 2 kids. And I know that sometimes I don't always express my best self to my children. They actually get the raw, ugly versions of me most of the time. And I think it's because I know that they'll always love me, which isn't always great. I'm working on that as a mom. But, I do love them. And I know that I love them, even if it's not always the best. So I just, I that's my advice to anyone who's watching us. If you're in any of these situations, I've experienced it all. And just give yourself grace and give the other person grace.
Yeah, I love that. I have to practice giving other people grace for sure. I feel like I neglected myself for so long. So now my phase is like I'm above, my feelings surpass other people. But it's a balance, absolutely. Kyrie, do you have last comment? And then also, like, obviously messages to anybody watching, but then also, Dami, if you wanted to add, like, what would be your, like, if you could have told your father where there wasn't going to be like a response, he was just forced to listen, what he needed to do, what would that be? And then Kyrie, I don't know if you have like kind of just closing remarks like what Dami just shared, but also like what your message would be. What do you think you could have done better? I guess because Dami shared what she could have done better, and what could he have done better?
I think what I could have done better was I think I took too much of, like, once I realized, like, yeah, he's still hanging around the same people, I took too far of a step back. And, like, I was only focused on, like, all right, if he call, make sure to be there. Like, I was still in college, so I was in DeKalb. I didn't have a car. I wish I could have, like, made the effort more to go see him. Because now he's back in a place that, I can only write and call or plan a trip to. So I definitely wish I would have put an effort more to go see him. I would definitely tell him though, like you're an adult, man. Like, just the things you told me when I was in high school, it's the same thing that applies to you now. It's like now you're in the same situation like that I was when I'm graduating college. Like, I don't have a job, like, well, I do have a job, but like, you started fresh. It's a fresh start. So take advantage of the fresh start. And don't fall into the old traps, like, because I feel like those old traps is what got you where you were going. So, and like, my dad he's like the rock of my dad's side of the family. Like, he's the rock. Like, everybody relies on him. Like, once he got out, like, people that I wouldn't even think to rely on him or relying on him. So I would just tell him, like, focus on yourself. Like, you first. Like, were they calling you while you in jail? Were they writing you? Well, they can't call you, but were they writing you? Were they spending your money on your books? Like, focus on you. Like, don't focus on anybody else.
I don't really know what I would tell my dad. I'm gonna be honest with you. I think about that sometimes, often, because it's so hard for me to sit here and like talk about it. I think because I'm very transparent. That's one thing, everybody knows about me. I don't, even if it's painful to talk about, the last thing I told my dad was that I hope he dies in prison. So I think that the things I would have told my dad are 100% different. I would have, I love you. I'm proud of you for coming this far. Just encouragement. I think he needed more encouragement from me rather than me telling him what he was doing wrong all the time. So I think I would have done a little bit more of that, even, whether parent or not, no parent, everybody is deserving of encouragement. I think he had so many people pointing at him, looking down at him like you're an inmate, not giving him opportunities, that sometimes he just needed somebody in his corner to be like, yo, I love you. Even if you're not perfect, you're doing okay. And I think that could have went a really long way. So that's what I would have told my father.
Yeah. Thank you guys, both of you. I'm asking questions I don't have answers to. I think it's easier for me. Like, I think for myself, for what I could have done, and it's interesting because it's just like has just passed. Like, it's just still right here behind me.
Yours is fresh.
Yours is very fresh.
It's very fresh, so it might
fresh. It's not even like full freedom yet for him. Right. But I think it would have been instrumental once we found out his release date and there was that last bit of time in there. I think I knew exactly the conversations I wanted to have, the things I wanted to say and share, and I didn't. Mm-hmm. And I think if I would have had those conversations before him getting out, like, it just would have been a bit of a different dynamic to lay down, like, how I want the relationship to be, how do you want the relationship to be, how are you going to prefer to communicate, what are the next steps, what are the plans? Like, those are things that it's like I'm thinking in my head. I want to ask, what kind of work do you want to do? Like, what kind of work are you interested in doing? Do you want to study? Like, what might you want to study? Like, go to school for anything? Like, what city do you want to, like, all of these different things. And they were constantly things that I was thinking about in those last months going up to the release date. And I wish that I would have just had the conversations before the coming out, because once he walked out of the prison, I mean, it's like, not only is that me in my world, but like it's 100 plus other people, because I have 10 siblings. So it's just like coming from every angle, every direction. Everyone is right. Everyone knows what's best, like myself included. You know what I'm saying? And that becomes such a fight amongst everybody. Who has the best intentions and is going to approach this the best way. And in the not good space in our relationship right now, I don't even know what I would say to my dad. I think I would just have to, there's just going to have to be more time. I don't think there's enough time to know that. But it is what it is. I mean, I think all of us, and I think anybody else who would be familiar with the situation, like Dami said, it's an independent thing. Like, we're all gonna be okay. Dami is okay. Kyrie's gonna be okay. T's gonna be okay. Like, not the best way to always look at everything, but it's still like, we've made it through X, Y, and Z. You have, I have. You're gonna make it. My dad, you're gonna be okay. Me, I'm gonna be okay. I think it's gonna be a matter of, are those two worlds gonna align where we're both gonna be okay in coexistence? And that's like, it's too new, like we all know. So you just, you would let it rock out.
Absolutely. I definitely think you're right. Like it's pretty fresh for you. So it may take him some time to realize, like, yeah, I need to buckle down and
Mhm.
family is more important than chilling with my friends from the 90s. So sometimes it takes a while. So definitely don't give up on them, but definitely don't feel like you got to become like their parent though, for sure.
Don't be responsible for other people's decisions. You are only in control of yourself.
Yes, definitely. Thank you guys so much. I think that this was really, really important. Kyrie, thank you so much for joining. I really knew that there had to be a Black man to chime in on this conversation.
For sure.
And you were just very upfront about your experience and your feelings. So I really appreciate that. Dami, of course, really appreciate you. You were willing to put it on the table, and I really appreciate that because it can be a really hard thing to do, and it's really just vulnerability. So thank you guys both, but I definitely think that people gain something from it. So I think all of that was worth it. So I really appreciate you for doing that.
Thank you for having me too.
Yes, thanks for having us.
Yes, thanks guys. All right, have a good night.
You too.
You too. Bye.
Bye.